Okay, so I think this is going to be a very wonderful discussion this afternoon of statesmen, scientists, which is really what this nation was founded upon. All of them uniquely in their varying degrees of statesmen and scientists, and I think we'll get some sense of that. So we'll start with former Senator Mike Gravel, then on to Dr. Howard Chang, and finally Keisha Rogers. So, well, just before we hear from former Senator Mike Gravel, really I should say senior statesman Mike Gravel, because as a has continued the fight that he is, as people probably know, famous for around the Pentagon Papers, of taking a very courageous act to do something that he didn't quite know what the repercussions were going to be, including potential. Yeah, and also on the draft. Yep, exactly. So, but I think, as is the case of a senior statesman who still continues on that mission, the reverberations of what he did then actually has bearing upon now. And with one example of this, people have probably heard by now, but on 28pages.org, there was a recent interview with Senator Gravel, which raised the idea of a Gravel moment of some congressmen, as Mike referred to earlier today, having the guts to do what he did, step up and read the damn 28 pages and the whole. Well, of course, there's probably 80,000 pages. That probably all wouldn't make it that far, but at least the 28 pages. That's a small start, and you know, make history again. So anyway, so I just think that's perhaps a testament to the fact that he's still going, and maybe I'll just leave it there and let Senator.
I can stand up as long as I can lean on something. There's a practice in the Senate when you're either debating or you got an ally who's there debating opposition, and the practice is that you make the statement when somebody's done a real great job and has stolen all your ideas. You say, I want to be associated with that person's remarks. Well, let me say with respect to Mrs. LaRouche, I want to be associated with her remarks. Because I don't think I could gild the lily any better than she has, because she was so thorough, covered all facets of it. All I can do is try to maybe bring you a political perspective that I have, which is different, an extension of their views, because I'm a growther also. I think that's the advancement that human beings must make in society. But I just want to underscore the fact when she brought up the Silk Road. For me, the Silk Road is the most significant occurrence that will take place in the 21st century. There's nothing that will surpass that goal. And I wish I could live long enough for the next 30 years to really see, because that's their benchmark, what they will have accomplished. And today, listening to our colleague from Russia, who I thought did such an excellent job in skirting the issues and not being insulting to the United States, which should be insulted. You know, we deserve every bad things that people can say about us. We've earned it, unfortunately. But the fact that we now see where Russia is going to play such a significant role through this Eurasian unification that will take place economically. And I'm embarrassed to say as an American that, we should join it. But that's not what motivates us. If you follow Obama's trips to Asia, And of course, I followed very closely what was going on in the Philippines, which is criminal what we're doing there, because we're going to load them up with a bunch of military people that are just going to despoil their environment and their culture. We're going to militarize them as we have militarized the American public. And I tried, and now I still hope that with this new president, who may have a few rough edges, but who may wake up and say, because he seems to have the gusto, who may wake up and say, hey, this is our country. This is not just a fiefdom of the American military, which is becoming. Most people aren't aware of the fact that the projections out of the Pentagon are to move 60% of our naval forces to Asia. That's going to be primarily the Philippines. And 60% of our Air Force capability is going to be moved to Asia, primarily the Philippines. Now, since we lost that battle, there are some good things happening over there, and that's in Japan, and of course, the incidents that have happened in Okinawa. Can you imagine that if you're an American soldier stationed in Japan, you can't have any alcohol? I mean, this is prohibition by the American military to avoid our soldiers getting drunk and going out and raping people. And now that happening in Okinawa is not the first time that's happened. This goes way back. And so the effort, and when you saw Abe and standing up there with Obama, and Obama standing there, and Abe's dumping on him over what had happened in Okinawa, and I'm sure what was going on in Obama's head is, oh, the guy's just politics. You know, he's got to talk like this because this is his constituency that's been mauled. So there's hope that maybe Japan, in fact, the talk is that they'd move the division out of Okinawa and move it to the Philippines. Can you imagine? So it's a very tragic situation that we are initiating. This has not been initiated by the Filipinos. And also the whole hoax, and that's what it is. It's a hoax over the East and South China Sea. China is doing no more than what the other national participants are doing. And you're going to hear it, because when the decision comes down from the commission, the UN Commission on the Law of the Sea, they're going to probably side with the Philippines. And China has already said that they're not going to abide by that. And for very obvious reasons. The issue is an issue of sovereignty. And that body does not have the power to determine who is the sovereign and who is not the sovereign. And basically, we do have a process in the law of the sea that can be handled by bilateral diplomatic discussions. And that's where it should be left. And that's where the Philippines want it, because they're afraid that we get too much of a presence there, that they're going to be the ones that suffer the consequences of that. And so what China is doing there is reasonable. It's an aid to navigation. I mean, here, I know it from Alaska. One of the problems of flying from Anchorage to Nome is that there's no weather stations very much in between, except at McGrath. And so you could go from one weather pattern to another weather pattern. You don't know it until you get there. And what's happening what the Chinese are doing, they'll be able to have effective communications and weather stations and be able to have stationed Coast Guard vessels, because who is the major beneficiary of the South China Sea? China. They move more cargo through there than anybody else. And second is Japan. That's the reason why you see the Japanese sort of moving towards China in this regard. Let me just add something, because I think I would then lapse into what Helga spoke about, and I've already made my case with respect to the Silk Road. What embarrasses me the most is that the United States is making a case for militarism wherever our president goes, and of course, what you see is you see the Pentagon, which has taken over our foreign policy. You see these admirals and generals making these ridiculous statements, whether they're making them in Europe through NATO or making it with respect to what they're going to do. And they're all jingoistic. Boy, we're going to show you we can sail our vessel anywhere we want. We can fly our planes anywhere we want. There's no threat. There's no threat to navigation in East China or South China Sea. This is a hoax that we've created in order for us to exercise our machoism and our military capability. I'm reminded of how the Spanish Empire ended. And the Spanish Empire, which had been blessed by the wealth of the Western Hemisphere, which they just looted, but they were blessed by it economically. And at the end of their empire, the only thing they could do is make the best swords in the world. That's what the Spanish could do. Now, at the end of the American Empire, the only thing we're going to be able to do is to make military armaments. And so the leaders will be Grumman and all the other companies that do this. And that's nothing to be proud of. But it does make jobs for people in every congressional district and does make money. And that's the difficulty of solving that problem. Now let me turn to what Hilda didn't cover, and I think Lyndon tries to cover. And that is that we are on the cusp of rethinking the intellectual aspects of human governance by the very fact that China was able to move 600 million people from poverty to middle class. Now, that is an accomplishment in the history of the civilization that's unequal. It's just unequal. And when you have to look at that, you say, well, they did that with an autocratic society, a model that was autocratic and actually did more good for human beings than any other model that we know of in human history. So that's really got to give us pause. Then when we look at what's going on in Europe, and we see how Putin has conducted himself, Putin has done a better job in leading Russia than anybody we've had in our countries since the Second World War, since FDR. That's how skillful Putin has played his cards. And so if there's anybody that's going to keep us out of war, it's not going to be the President of the United States. It's going to be the President of Russia, of Putin. That's who's going to keep us out of war because he's clever enough to do this. And that's where the hope lies, not with us. And of course, I don't have to go into the history of tell you how bad things were under the Soviet Union, who kept us out of war when we were the instigators in many instances of a crisis that should not have taken place. I just want to touch on what's going on politically. You want me to, since I have a political mind, I follow it very, very closely. And that is that Hillary will undoubtedly win the nomination. She will also probably get elected president. I mean, Donald Trump will just, is a narcissistic fool, is the kindest thing I can say about him. But with Hillary, this is very dangerous. Hillary is a warmonger. Hillary is a hawk, much, much more than Obama ever thought of being. And Obama has been a hawk. You know, he's the only president that has had his administration totally immersed in war. We ought to take back the Nobel Prize. You know, it was misbegotten to begin with. And of course, Obama and Hillary and their corruption and all that, they've really cheated, what's his name, Bernie Sanders, from getting the nomination. They just cheated him out of it. Now, I'm a great admirer of Bernie Sanders and the agenda he wants to pursue. And for those of you that are of a conservative bent, let me point out to you that government is a tool. If you need it, you pick it up and use it. If you don't need it, you don't pick it up. The problem is that human nature is such that when you pick up the tool and you move in a certain direction with the tool, that there becomes a party of people that are invested in it. And so they linger on with their power to not make it work very well. Here, democracy is broken, totally broken. And Hillary, when she becomes president, you heard it here. The only thing that's going to happen in her administration is her fighting off impeachment. And the impeachment is based upon the criminality she's done with the classification process that has many laws associated with it that she's violated. And of course, with the foundation and the harmonious play between Hillary and what the foundation was able to get in the way of contributions from dictatorial countries like Saudi Arabia and the crucial state countries, it's criminal, and it's known. This is not. I'm not revealing anything that's very secret. It's known, and it's also known that Obama has been able to slow walk the FBI into not coming up with anything before the election. And so Obama is guilty of this. And it's terrible because he's been sabotaging Bernie. And of course, Bernie's always saying, well, he is always gracious towards Obama. Well, he doesn't have any choice. Obama's president, he controls the Democratic Party, and Wasserman Schultz and that whole cabal. So things do not look well under the best of circumstances, because what Hillary could do is, she's facing impeachment, is she could get panicky and start a war just to get everybody's eyes off of the impeachment process and focus on her being the commander-in-chief. And she'll be a tough commander-in-chief, more than we've seen anybody in a long time, because that's her nature. So let me give you what could be the positive side, and that is Bernie Sanders was criticized all during the campaign that he's got a great agenda. I happen to like it very much. Some of you may like pieces of it, and others not other pieces. But he never had a plan to get his agenda enacted. And what he's come up with is the same thing as a lot of pundits come up with. And that is, well, the people should, or the government should. What does that mean? With $2.50 and you can get a Starbucks coffee, but the people should and the government should means nothing. Means nothing, because the government is where the problem exists, and the people who want to solve the problem don't have the tools to do it. All the people can do is give their power away on election day. Let me repeat. The power of the people is to give their power when they vote on election day. And Mark Twain understood it very well when he made the statement that, if you're hoping to accomplish anything by voting, you can be assured they wouldn't let us do it. And they wouldn't let us do it is the 1% who've controlled our society right from the Constitutional Convention that defined our government. I've written to Bernie. I've not received a response. I can understand he's up to his head in this. And if his staff saw what I wrote, I don't think they'd give it to him, because if there's anybody that doesn't understand direct democracy, it's the consultants who manipulate the constituency to get votes. So they're the last group to understand this. What I'm about to tell you is I've never been successful in getting any elected official to buy into it. And the reason why is because what I'm suggesting requires unreserved faith in the people. And that is direct democracy, where, now, most of you are from California. You know you can do initiatives and it becomes law. Well, stop and think. If you can do initiatives at the state level, and it's a very imperfect process because we copied the Swiss, and the Swiss had a structural flaw in what we copied. And so what happens is that you turn around and you you well, I just lost. I just got a senior moment. They come at me frequently. But what will happen is that if we could equip Bernie to understand that the answer is not the agenda, that's the what. The revolution he's talking about is the how. How do we bring about this? And the only way you can bring it about is if you can empower the people to make laws. It makes very much sense. You can't bring the people into the executive or judiciary, but there's nothing stopping you, because we do it in 23 states in this country, very imperfectly, nothing stopping you from bringing the people into the operation of government as lawmakers. The central power of government is making laws. And so if you cannot get that power, you will never enjoy freedom. Because the freedom that I'm talking about was designed 2,000 years ago, articulated 2,000 years ago by Marcus Cicero. And that was that freedom is participation in power. If you can't participate in power, you are then the subject of power. And so for the people to become free and is to participate in power, the only way they can do it is by making laws themselves. I have legislation that it's taken me 7 years to write, and it's on the shelf. It's a constitutional amendment, and it's a Legislative Procedures Act copying procedures that take place in the Congress and many other legislatures. Now, will that get enacted into law? I'd given up. But there's a window of opportunity if now Bernie could realize that with his troops, rather than watch them dissipate, which will happen like it happens with any cause, rather than watch them dissipate, he could give them grist to pull them together, and that is to go ahead and act on that. So let me end with that and repeat the Cicero comment, which is very pithy, and that is, if you want freedom, you have to participate in power. Period. Thank you.